and always will, is about moving humanity forward. And remember, folks, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Hey, folks, the man with the pinky ring and the New York thing, forget about it. Bad Brad Berkowitz. And you're watching another Bad Brad Berkowitz show on the Ringside Report web TV channel. Now, make sure you hit that button, whatever corner it's in, and subscribe. Leave your comments below the video. I greatly appreciate it. I always personally respond. As well, follow me on Twitter at BadBradRSR. Again, it's at BadBradRSR. Well, folks, tonight I have a special panel with two ladies that I greatly respect. So let's do this introduction, tell you who they are, and then let's bring them on the show, and let's get started. First is a personal friend and a regular guest on my show, Democratic Representative Gloria Johnson of Tennessee. You as well know her as one of the Tennessee Three. She will talk about the legislative side of the LGBTQ laws being put forth and in many cases passed, as well in reference to LGBTQ gender-affirming care and the LGBTQ community as a whole. As well on my panel today with Representative Johnson from Miami, Florida, is Dr. Natasha Polopoulos, who is a pediatric psychologist. She completed her postdoctoral fellowship at Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Dr. P advocates for sexual and gender diversity to establish a safe and inclusive environment for LGBTQ plus individuals. She is a member of the Society of Pediatric Psychology and has co-authored several peer-reviewed publications and presentations. I am hosting this panel today to not just educate my viewers and disseminate factual information. I am also here to learn myself on the issue that is putting LGBTQ kids and adults in harm's way from not just the attacks from the MAGA Republican Party, but also the MAGA cult of Trump. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this panel started. Forget about it. Well, first to both of you, Dr. P, Representative Johnson, I want to thank you for doing this panel tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. I know you guys are busy. Want to read something for the viewers, and then we'll go into all of our talking points and legislative information. We'll go from there. I'm here to host and give you, as I said, my platform. I may have questions or points off of something you say, but as I mentioned to you offline, I have my personal opinions, but this is not my wheelhouse, as it is both of yours. And I respect you both in what you do. I just know personally it's breaking my heart seeing the LGBTQ community and LGBTQ kids, especially, being attacked in various states, not just Tennessee, by Congress, by Senate, by the MAGA Republicans, and not to stop there, but the MAGA cult of Trump with this insanity of going and Target and pulling clothes down. And I don't even want to get started. But one more thing before we get started, Dr. P, Gloria and I, Representative Johnson and I, have something that we like to personally say to you. Are you ready, Gloria?
I'm ready.
Okay. Happy birthday to you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
And many,
this is
many
the best birthday gift.
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm honored to have you ladies on here. Let's start out like this. I'll throw this talking point out to you, Dr. P, and you roll from there with it. What LGBTQ plus young people are experiencing, particularly kids?
Well, we're currently in a youth mental health crisis. That's youth across the board. And LGBTQ plus youth are experiencing even worse outcomes, meaning they're experiencing way more levels of suicidality, whether it's suicidal behavior, suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, trauma, physical and verbal harassment at school. This past year, 50% of LGBTQ plus kids seriously considered suicide, and 25% actually attempted suicide. So they're suffering, and now not only have they been suffering for a while, but it's becoming amplified by adults who should be helping them as opposed to harming them.
Okay. Any question at that point, Representative Johnson, or anything legislative you'd like to put in off of that talking point?
Just, absolutely. She's exactly right. And all of these attacks by my state and others on these young people, these vulnerable young people already, are just absolutely horrifying to me. I have talked to multiple parents who are leaving Tennessee, parents who are taking their kids because they just have to stop their treatment. And they're having to take their kids out of state, but others, for various reasons, their children do not feel safe in Tennessee. And so they're having to separate their family to move out of state.
Okay. I have a question off of that talking point. You talked about being picked on in school. So from your professional opinion to parents out there, that, public school is tough because kids, I mean, even when I went to school, it was tough. I know we didn't have kids weren't as open as they are today, and things have changed since I graduated elementary school in 1980. But what advice would you give parents of being reserved? Because I have, like I said, it's not my wheelhouse. To my knowledge, we don't have separate schools for LGBTQ kids, correct? Or do we? Or how does that work? Or advice you can give parents that are worried about putting their kids in public school, or I shouldn't say they're in and they're getting bullied. Where do they go?
Yeah, so we don't have schools just for LGBTQ kids because we shouldn't. We should all be able to coexist. And in fact, all of the data shows that youth in general have better outcomes, meaning mental health outcomes and academic outcomes, not just the gay kids at school, but also the straight heterosexual kids do better when there is a more safe, affirming space. And what I mean by affirming, which is what I'll talk to you about, how parents can be helpful and schools can be helpful, meaning that we're not discriminating, that it is okay if someone identifies as LGBTQ. 1 out of 3 LGBTQ plus kids are physically threatened at school simply because of their identity. So like you said, middle school is hard, high school is hard, let alone when your identity that you may be experiencing some shame or some guilt or some fear around is being attacked by the adults that are meant to keep you safe. So what I always tell parents in terms of bullying, we know with bullying, the way that it ends is by activating bystanders. What that means is having a plan at school, going to the school, and by having safe spaces, other peers will stick up for their friends. And that's the way we dismantle the system of bullying. At home, parents just being accepting, being open, listening to their kids. And if parents are having a hard time, that's totally okay. Seek out guidance from a therapist, from a school counselor, from a social worker, anyone who can provide more support.
Okay. Want to piggyback off of that point that you just made, because you have a lot of people, especially on the right, that want to say, oh, this woke environment, all of this. I recruited for United States Navy from 1999 to 2001. And one of the schools that I recruited out of a high school, and I know Representative Johns, I know you like sports, so I know you remember this movie, and you probably too, Dr. P. Remember the Titans, the Denzel Washington movie about T.C. Williams. In 2000, I would set up my table in school with the pencils and the brochures trying to recruit, and kids would come to the table. In 2000, which as we know is 23 years ago, they had, it wasn't LGBTQ then, it was gay and lesbian, and they had stuff set up within the school. And probably other schools had too, but I was impressed by that because it was Alexandria. It was a inner city school, okay, had a heavy Black population at that time, but mixed, more immigrants that came to the country, Venezuela, El Salvador, because I recruited out of there. They had a class set up. So these people that scream about, oh, this country is so woke. No, I believe that, yeah, we're becoming woke because we're finally addressing issues that we should have addressed decades ago about what we're talking about tonight. And Representative John says, well, the video I have pinned on my page of my dad fighting Anita Bryant. This Friday is 46 years ago for gay rights at the time. So we're facing these things that we should have faced a long time ago. So when they scream and holler about being woke, I don't buy that ideology, because we're dealing with human beings. This is a humanity issue to me. And I'm glad that we're dealing with it now, finally, though it's very tough. And again, it breaks my heart. So I appreciate that information that you put out, Dr. P, about that. The next talking point Why do LGBTQ people experience worse health outcomes?
Yeah. And Rep Johnson, please jump in. I feel like we can definitely tag into these questions because you also see it from a different standpoint or different angle.
Right.
So the big theory, and I don't want to get too technical, it's called minority stress theory. What that means is, like we said, everyone experiences stress. What happens with LGBTQ plus kids is they experience the general stress of being, whether it's 13, whether it's 16, whether it's 18, whether it's being an adult, and they experience the minority stress piece. And those are unique stressors, meaning fear of family and peer rejection, fear that they will be outed when they're not ready or to someone they're not ready to be outed to, the stress of constantly having to be on alert about who knows of their identity and concealing it. And to be honest, it's a lot of the internalized stigma and shame that LGBTQ people experience because they are so marginalized and stigmatized. And that, with the stress of life, that's what compounds and worsens outcomes for LGBTQ plus kids.
And I know I met a couple the other night that were transgender, and one was kicked out of the home. And so there they were with, trying to get a job, but it was a low wage job with no insurance. So you don't have the ability to get the care that you need because perhaps you've lost your housing because of it. And it's just the stress is just incredible, and just the fear of being who you are in a state that does not respect you and demonstrates it daily at the legislative level. I cannot imagine being a target of my state and trying to live my life. We live in a state, unfortunately, and there are other states where the elected officials do not respect the human dignity of every single person. And it's frightening.
Okay. Dr. Pill, I want to ask you a question about the right, in particular, like the Marjorie Taylor Greens and other Q insanity that just throw this crap out there, and their cult just runs with it. Are they underage? When I say underage, I'm saying under 18. Is in any state, and Representative Johnson, is for you too. Are they, because this is what they put out, I see it on Twitter. Any child, are they cutting the testicles off, or a penis, or a boy with what they call puberty blockers, I think, a 7, 8-year-old child, or anybody underage, let's just say under 18, getting breasts, cutting penises off, anything like that. Is that happening?
So what you're relating to is gender affirming care, which is there are gender clinics. And these were clinics that existed. They exist not just for people who may be transgender, they exist for kids who are born with sexual development disorders, meaning they're born with different sex chromosomes or characteristics. Puberty blockers have been used for multiple decades, and they've shown to be effective and also reversible. So it's very nuanced. I won't get into the major details. To answer your question, no. Minors under the age of 18 are not walking into clinics and having gender affirming procedures, meaning they're not having, like you said, their penis or their testicle removed. What does happen is the process of going through gender affirming care, number one, it always involves parent and parental consent and understanding. Now, for someone who is below the age of 18, WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, has in their guidelines that gender affirming surgeries are not to be performed under the age of 18. There can be very minor caveats, meaning that if someone is 17 and they are so psychologically distressed by what is happening in their body, there can be discussions with the family and the physicians about how to proceed. I'll also mention that gender affirming care always involves a psychological evaluation. So no, just like Jon Stewart said in his interview, 9-year-olds are not walking into gender affirming clinics and having these life-changing procedures.
And that's what, go ahead, Representative Johnson, go ahead.
A huge lie across Tennessee. Matt Walsh, his stupid blog, he now lives in Tennessee, and he's one of those talking about genital mutilation and all of this stuff, and accusing Vanderbilt of performing these surgeries. And it's absolutely not happening with minors. there were puberty blockers, there were hormone treatments with a lot of care and a lot of conversation with the child, with the parents, with the doctors. And so it's ludicrous. These things that they're saying, they're just lies. And it's shocking to me what people will believe when it's told to them by people who clearly have an agenda and have been caught lying multiple times. It's just shocking. It's such misinformation and disinformation to gin up their base, and it's hurting people.
It's getting people killed, and it's
yes.
You know, try not to curse, but like I said, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she is one of the #1, and I'm saying, I'm not asking you either one of you to condone what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it because it's my show. #1 pieces of garbage in this country that gens this up and will get LGBTQ kids and adults killed behind. We have insane freaking people walking in Target department store in that piece of crap. I went after him, by the way, Matt Walsh. He got 100 times the following I did. But you know what? For whatever reason, I hope you're watching this, Matt, because I have no problem dancing with you. He wouldn't come after me. I called him out on his nonsense that he has this big platform. Why don't you have different views, but use it for honesty? I don't care if you have a difference of opinion, but let's be factual, because when you have these large platforms, you're going to get people killed. Now, with that said, the other thing I want to ask you, Dr. P, what's the statistics, if you know them, about, I know we're talking about kids, but in LGBTQ community, transgender Black women that are getting killed in record numbers? And I'm going to say it because I'm an advocate of civil rights. We don't hear enough about Black transgender. Is that how you way? I don't want to mispronounce it. Is that how you would say it? Black transgender women or Black, or however you say it. I don't want to mispronounce because it's not my wheelhouse. Getting killed, and we hardly ever hear it. It doesn't make the national news. So do you have any statistics on that by chance?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this also comes into the idea of that we're not just one identity. So also what's happening in a lot of states like Florida is that Black individuals are being discriminated. We're not talking about historical facts. Just like Rep. Johnson said, these are facts. There is no argument about what happened in history, and we need to learn about it. That way we can do better. But instead, there are laws being in place that are actually discriminating and stopping those conversations. So we have sexual orientation, we have gender identity, we have race, we have ethnicity. What you're hinting at is also this intersectionality of everyone's different identities. Black transgender women are the most targeted people in our society. They are murdered at absurdly higher rates simply for their existence and their identities. I believe 2022 was the deadliest year for transgender people in terms of how many were murdered. And we don't talk about it enough. And oftentimes when it's talked about, it's more so picking at their identities. And I will say the right, making fun of this. And this is where this is dangerous. I want to piggyback off what you mentioned earlier about how this is harming LGBTQ plus kids. Since the Don't Say Gay bill was passed in Florida, the first one, the rhetoric of groomers and pedophiles related to LGBTQ plus people surged 400% on Twitter. Kids spend the majority of their days on screens and about 4 hours on social media. They are bound to see this rhetoric. The harm this has is horrendous, and it is not backed by any. There is no research or data that shows that LGBTQ plus people are groomers or pedophiles. So that is a terrible narrative, and the far right has capitalized that and is now just smearing and demonizing LGBTQ plus people. So as a kid, when that's what you're hearing and you're already worried about your identity and maybe feelings that you're having, when you're hearing that from adults, it's so demoralizing and dehumanizing. So how can the far right be shocked that LGBTQ plus kids are dying at higher rates, that Black transgender women are being murdered at higher rates? All the statistics about the LGBTQ plus community for our transgender folks, they're usually 10 to 15% worse.
I believe it. Representative Johnson, you want to say anything off of that?
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back to how even your own government sees you. And in Tennessee, we stopped the gender affirming care for teens, or for children, but also they passed a law that if you got TennCare, which is Medicare, you could not get gender affirming care if you were on Medicare. So they're not just doing it to children, they're doing it to adults as well in Tennessee. Another thing that we passed was the horrible pronouns bill, which basically allows teachers to bully students. They don't, if a child and his family wants to be called a certain name or use certain pronouns, if it's against a teacher's religion, she can ignore that, or he can ignore that. Now, I can tell you that most teachers I worked with would never do that. But there are some who absolutely will, because I've talked to quite a few transgender individuals who grew up in rural counties in Tennessee and had to deal with that.
It's, once again, who are you hurting? Understanding, yes. And in fairness, I'm not with the MAGA wing, but for people that are in between are just confused because they don't understand all of this, because a lot of it's coming so quickly, as I said earlier in the show, because we didn't deal with these things when we should have. We never in this country have a tendency to not do things. Sometimes we do incrementally, but we don't when it comes to human issues, whether it's civil rights, whether it's LGBTQ rights. So now we have I want to almost say a reckoning to a certain extent, because we have to. But why do pronouns bother you? But then you get Ted Cruz and these idiots, and I'm saying it, that want to get up there. My pronouns are kissing my ass. That's really professional and really helps out. That's really setting an example for your kids by being an idiot, instead of stepping back and saying, no, I don't completely understand this, but you know what? Let's put country over party. Let's put humanity over politics. And let's all sit together and hash this out and work it out and understand. That's what religion is supposed to be about. Jesus was, if you believe in God, and I do, and I'm not a Bible thumper, but Jesus was accepting of everybody. But the Republican Party and the MAGA wing and their guy that plays golf every day, they're not so accepting, and they don't care about humanity. So another talking point that I appreciate you addressing, Representative Johnson, legislation. How are anti-LGBTQ plus laws harming kids, or what is being passed? Maybe just, you may know more about Tennessee, but being passed or being brought to the floor to be voted on. Can you talk about those, please?
Well, specifically, we're banning books that are related to LGBTQ. We are, Tennessee has set up systems so that it's easy to ban books that you disagree with. And we're not allowing care. What your health care should be decided between you and your physician and your family if you're underage. It should not be, you shouldn't have a legislator or the governor in your doctor's office determining your care. And we have gone into that in Tennessee with children and with women. And that is unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. And as I've talked about with this pronoun bill that just allows school staff to harass students and bully them, and then taking away transgender care just because you're poor and you're on Medicare, it is horrific. It is saying you are not equal. You are a second-class citizen. We don't want you here. I mean, that's how these kids feel, and that's how their parents feel. And, it's important to feel safe at school. We talked a little bit about school earlier, but you can't learn if you don't feel safe. And you can't feel safe if your teachers are allowed to make fun of you. You're already getting it most likely from kids around you, but the adults in the room are given license to actually do it legally. I mean, we don't even allow that at our workplace at the legislature, but we're going to pass a law so kids will be subject to bullying. It's ridiculous and mean and just filled with hate, and it's not respecting human dignity. you don't have to like what other people do, and you can disagree with how they live their lives, but you can't demean them and make them less than human and try to rid your state. I mean, these are people that contributed to society just like everybody else. If you want to go after groomers, I think there are 1,500 kids that have been abused by priests in Illinois. Perhaps that's where we need to look.
Okay. Dr. P, do you want to say anything off of that? If not, I got to, so I don't want to interject, but do you have anything?
Yeah, just we could talk about pronouns for a while, so we don't have to, but just when we mention pronouns, there are studies that show that affirmed pronoun usage among kids reduces suicidal behavior significantly. I'm talking like 50 to 60%. So when for some people it's just a pronoun, for others it's I'm getting the urge to cut and not live anymore.
And I'm going to say it again, and I'm the military guy in the house. I'm supposed to be, have this one way of thinking, and I'm completely opposite. So I get attacked from Veterans for Trump all the time because I can't stand them. It does not bother me. To me, it's a respect thing. If a person feels comfortable by being addressed by, it does not hurt me one bit. Just like if you want to be called doctor, if you want to be called representative in your line of work, fine. That doesn't bother me. If you want to, a pronoun, but then again, you have people like Don Jr., his son, who goes on his videos, coked out of his mind, knocking pronouns. And then again, they use their platforms to disseminate horrible information. And as I said earlier, they're getting people beat up, people killed. Instead of spending all this time about Bud Light and Target, there's so many other things that they could mental health issues, because half of them have mental health issues. Let's just be honest. Why don't you help that on the right instead of going after Bud Light because they have a transgender person as a spokesperson? If you don't want to drink Bud Light, then don't drink it. Who cares? But it's
well, especially when we're talking about school. When I taught elementary school, kids would just all of a sudden they decide they wanted to be called a new name. They might have seen a movie with a princess character or whatever, and they wanted to be called by that name. And you called them by that name, and it just made them happy. It didn't hurt me at all. I mean, you got to remember, it's hard sometimes to remember, but it just makes them happy. Why would you not want to make a child happy and safe in your classroom? I don't understand how people don't understand that, because kids learn better when they feel safe and happy in their classroom. They don't learn if they do not feel safe and that they are being ridiculed, especially by the adults.
I agree. I got to ask you, Representative Johnson, I'm going to throw out some names. I'm not asking you to take personal shots, but I'm going to ask you a generic question. So Monty Fritz and Jason Zachary and Gino Bolso and your Speaker of the House, Cam Sexton, with all of his issues. I don't even know how he's in there. I know people protest at the Capitol a lot, peacefully protest. I'm sure you have LGBTQ people come and protest, right? Yeah. I'm sure that at some point they've passed them. How do they look themselves? Well, that may be a hard question. How do they pass them? And some of them are probably their constituents, I would assume, because they in their areas, they may not have voted for them, but they're still their constituents. Like you always say, even if you didn't vote for me, Representative Johnson, you're still my constituent. I still have a responsibility to you. And that's the way politics should be. What President Obama said about blue states and red states, it's the United States. But how do those particular ones that I call, how do they face these people when they pass these laws that are so against their human rights?
I think that they kind of live in a bubble. I think they go home, they go to church, they go to Republican meetings, and just live in a place where you can just sort of surround yourself with people who think like you. I'm in East Tennessee. I'm a Democrat in deep red East Tennessee. So half the people or more that I talk to every day are Republicans. And, and I can have good conversations and all of that. But if you think about when we've had protests at the Capitol or things like that, what you'll see is they will walk past them and say they're lining the way into the House floor or something like that. They will walk past them and not even make eye contact. During the gun violence protests, that's what they did to these parents and these students. did not look them in the eye. We were stopping and having conversations and hugging them. They wouldn't even look the people that they represent in the eye. It's cowardly, and I do not know what they're afraid of.
The truth. The truth. It's the only thing I can think of. Dr. P, let me ask you this: with you in Florida, are there any, DeSantis? I know he had the Don't Say Gay bill, but what else has he passed that you haven't already discussed legislative down there? I know about the books. That's pretty nationwide what he's done there. What else has he done? Or if not DeSantis, more local, maybe local representatives, I don't know, passed that is affecting the LGBTQ community that we may not know about on the national stage in the news.
Yeah, we touched upon the ban on pediatric gender affirming care completely. And like Rep. Johnson mentioned, that's also going after adults who have Medicaid or Medicare. So their insurance is not covering. And the analogy I make so people can understand is when you have transitioned into the life that affirms who you are, that reduces your suicidality, increases your hopefulness for life and to live, when you are prohibited from accessing that medication, such as this ban on gender affirming care, it would be like diagnosing someone with diabetes and not giving them access to insulin. That's how dire the situation is down here in Florida. So we have the Don't Say Gay bill, part 1, that then was just now expanded. It started with K to 3rd grade, and then that expanded now up until 12th grade. So those are the two, they're the same bill, but it was an extension. We have the ban on gender affirming care for minors, which is also now extended to adults. So the conversation is silly because it starts like, oh, we're protecting kids, but we're harming kids and we're now harming adults. We're harming their families. Another bill that is circulating that I'm horrified by is, I believe it's called the Medical Conscious Act, which is now a bill that proposes that medical providers, including psychologists, EMTs, physicians in the state of Florida, can deny care to someone because of their own personal beliefs or religion or whatever it may be. So I can't understand that we take an oath to keep people safe. If you go into medicine, into psychology, you are there to help people. You are there to do no harm. And now we have a governor who is saying, but no, it's okay. You just let them. If you don't believe in caring for people because they may be LGBTQ, they may be Black, whatever identity it is that you may not align with or you just don't understand, you don't have to treat them. So I can't even believe that I'm saying these words because it honestly sounds like a joke, but this is actually the situation in Florida. I know it's not, this other bill that was passed is not about LGBTQ plus individuals, but again, minorities. The 6-week abortion ban in Florida is horrendous. And this ties into the mental health of young girls in the state of Florida across the US who are suffering tremendously. 70% are experiencing persistent sadness and hopelessness. And now we're showing them that you have no control over your body. And that's coupled with the fact that recent data shows that adolescent females are being targeted and they're having very high levels of sexual assault. Higher levels than in the past decade. But now we're also not giving them the option to have a conversation with their family and their physician about, is it an option for me to decide how I want to proceed with my health care?
Go ahead.
The law that she was talking about people not having to treat someone they don't want to treat, did that pass somewhere else? It seems that I've heard it elsewhere that it already passed.
Me too.
But I'm not positive where.
Well, I don't know. You know what I did? Deb told me tonight, I think, I don't know if it just passed, but I think Idaho or Iowa, I don't know, one of them passed where women can't go, they can't leave the state to get an abortion. I don't even know if that's fascism. I mean, how could you even pass that? But but going back to what you said, Dr. P, about abortion, let's talk about that a little bit more, because I marched last June when Roe versus Wade got overturned here in the town square, and the veterans of Trump. Oh, they love. I mean, the veterans, the Trump MAGA. Oh, they love that. They came with the big trucks and they tried to gas us out with the muffler, the black smoke, but that didn't work. Cops didn't do nothing, of course, but oh well, we still marched. You have somebody like Kristi Noem, I forget where she's the governor of, but she's a disgusting, vile individual, who said that it's a blessing for a 10-year-old girl who's either been molested or raped to have a baby. First of all, from a medical standpoint, it's your wheelhouse much more than mine. No 10-year-old having a baby, and I don't have to be a doctor to know that's not healthy for her body, number one. That should be just common sense. But number two, it's not a blessing when you were raped or molested. And these states that want to pass where you can't have basically any abortion in the where it's the mom. So it's more, and I can't stand these Republican pundits, some of them that go on TV. I don't watch CNN anymore, but they usually go on CNN when I used to watch it and talk about, oh, there's adoption in there, but they never say they'll adopt these kids. But there's hit families. Yeah, okay. So when you talk about homelessness, and you know doggone well, both of you know very well that it's going to affect African-American women a lot more if they get pregnant, if they get raped or they're molested and they don't have access, it's going to hurt them. But passing laws that somebody that's molested with no exceptions, and people like Lindsey Graham and all these, again, it's humanity. This is humanity. I can debate somebody that's pro-life, that's with exceptions. I can't debate somebody that's pro-life that says with no exceptions, none. To me, that's the most evil thing that you can do. Dr. P, let me ask you this, statistic-wise, and you might have said it earlier, what are we seeing across the country, and you may have said it, for underage children being either molested or raped, whether it's by a family member or somebody that just, on the street? What's the numbers look like?
Yeah. So what we did see is the CDC puts out the youth risk behavior survey. So that, and I'll also talk about how Florida quietly dropped out of that survey. That's the survey that gives us the data so we can understand what's happening in our young folks, so we can create policies that are driven by data to help them. That's a separate point. However, what we did see is across the US, this survey has been running for 30 years. The past data that came out showed that females were significantly much more targeted and experienced sexual violence. And interestingly, for things like substances, alcohol use went down in teens, yet sexual violence towards girls went up. Depression, sadness, hopelessness, it's affecting all youth, particularly our adolescent females. And to have these types of bills and laws where exceptions may be that you have to prove you were raped, what type of society are we living in? The psychological trauma is beyond belief. And then as a psychologist, I'm being asked to come in and provide care. There's only so much you can do at that point. And what I will say, a lot of the points we've touched upon, my response to the people that you mentioned who have said, oh, a 10-year-old being raped is a blessing because they now will be a mother. The two things I say is, what if that was your daughter? Okay. And two, you come into the public hospital of the city you work in and you get consulted and you see on the order that it says 10-year-old just gave birth following sexual assault. And you tell me how you look that child in the eye when they are literally laying next to their newborn who's crying and they're watching Mickey Mouse and cartoons because that's how young they are. And I am not a medical physician. I will say my understanding is that when minors are that young, just their bodies, they can't endure that stress, that they have to be sedated. And there have to be certain measures that are taken, whether it's C-section, whatever it is, because that young of a body should not be experiencing that type of physical trauma. So those are my responses to people who put out those types of perspectives.
Okay, Representative Johnson, go ahead.
Yeah, forced birth is barbaric, certainly, especially when it's a child, but even when it's adult. Forcing someone, allowing a rapist to choose the mother of their child, but not allowing a woman to choose not to have her rapist baby is barbaric. I mean, there's just nothing else to it. And in Tennessee, we have no exceptions. We don't have 6 weeks. We have at conception, no exceptions. They say they passed a life of the mother exception this year, but they did not. The only thing they passed was for ectopic pregnancies and already dead fetuses. That's the only thing that can be removed. And so that is not protecting the life of the mother at all. You've got moms who have cancer and can't get treatment, or the situation I was in when I was 21 and had an aortic aneurysm the size of a grapefruit. And, you know, knowing that it wouldn't last through a pregnancy. But today, not only would I not survive, but obviously the fetus wouldn't survive. So life of the mother, it is, you know, it encompasses a whole lot more than an ectopic pregnancy. And so in Tennessee, we are subjecting very young girls to a nightmare. And it is beyond my comprehension how people can think this is okay.
Okay. Dr. P, I'm curious, and I'm not asking for no names or anything like that, but in confidence, do you have teachers in Florida coming to you for advice that, you know, like you said, they can't, they're not allowed to, they could almost kind of bully the kids like Representative Johnson was saying, but don't say gay and all that stuff. Do you have teachers coming to you in confidence? Like, what should we do? Because it's so, we don't want to lose our job. We love teaching because kids are our whole, you even got the right attacking teachers. You know this, Representative Johnson, because you were a teacher. The right attacking teachers that call their students their kids. It's this effing insanity to me. I remember I went to school in Miami, at Miami Beach, North Miami Beach, from 1975 to 1984, under two Democratic governors, Governor Graham, Bob Graham, and I think Reuben Askew was the other one. We didn't have it. I'm not saying all the teachers were the greatest in the world, but there was a lot of teachers I love. We didn't have this insanity. But do you have teachers that are coming to you scared because we're like, this is against what we believe in? You know, what do we do, Dr. P?
Yeah, I've had it in the capacity where teachers are parents of kids that I'm teaching, right? So they're parents and they're also functioning in the capacity of an educator. And parents are coming to me, you know, again, what I would say back to these people who are passing these laws are be in the room after a child has overdosed on Tylenol to the point they almost need a liver transplant. And the main factor as to why they overdosed to end their life was because they were outed for being gay or for maybe being more gender diverse or for just simply talking about these topics because they're trying to understand who they are. And imagine that child telling you, I did that because it's so unbearable to live in this world. In that moment, how can you not affirm someone and how can you not try to instill hope? So I work with parents about how to be affirming, meaning how do you create a supportive environment for your kid when the rest of the world is basically on fire? So what I talk to parents about, which some of them are educators, are finding what works for you and your family, having difficult conversations with your kid about this is what's going on. And yeah, at school, we may have to adjust to this. You know who you are. You know that we love you and we support you. And then connecting them in the community with other people who they may also be seeking support and seeking help. But again, it's somewhat like our hands are tied in the state of Florida right now.
Okay. Representative Johnson, anything else you'd like to add to that? Or I'm going to go to the next talking point.
Yeah, no, well, just, you know, that's some of the things that we do. We have an LGBTQ prom here in Knoxville for kids who don't feel comfortable, want to go to a prom, but don't feel comfortable. And so they can all go to prom, you know, together from all the schools in one place. And just because they feel safe and affirmed and lifted up. But the goal, of course, is to be able to do this in any school where you are, private school, public school, anything. But unfortunately, it is not the goal of our legislators. They only are concerned about keeping some kids safe, but not all kids. And, you know, what I tell teachers and parents is sometimes parents feel really guilty because they think they need to move or they want to move. And I said, you do what's best for your family. You know, I totally understand. Stay and fight. Your child does not need to fight. If your child is going to feel safer somewhere else, do what you need to do for your family. Do not feel bad about that. But I'm getting more and more parents that want to speak out about it now because of their concern for the whole community.
Okay. The last talking point I want to address is explaining, and if we did some of it already, let me know, because we did a lot of talking so far, putting out some good information. Explaining the concepts of gender identity and sexual orientation, including gender affirming care. If we didn't cover that, go ahead, Dr. P.
We talked about gender affirming care,
Okay.
but things like gender identity and sexual orientation, which are these concepts that, you know, I don't know why it's like, it's so scary to talk about it. It's not scary to talk about someone being heterosexual. Why is it so scary to talk about a male being attracted to a male, or vice versa, or someone being attracted to any gender? I don't know why these have become scary concepts, but sexual orientation is who you are attracted to, and gender identity is who you identify as. And I will say that gender identity starts to form really early on in life. I mean, I'm talking like after age 5, kids are really starting to identify like, oh, like I'm a boy or I'm a girl. And these concepts are being confused with things like sex assigned at birth, which is like when a child is born with certain chromosomes and external genitalia, they're assigned male, female, or intersex. Gender identity is this innate sense of yourself and your identity. And it's not black and white. And it's not just your cisgender, meaning like I was born a female, I identify as a female, or you're transgender. It's not even just that, right? Like there's people who are a little more gender diverse. And like you said, Brad, that's not harming anyone. It's allowing them to exist and it's benefiting them. It's not harming other people. Things of sexual orientation and gender identity, they are not contagious. Talking about those concepts does not make someone more inclined to be of a specific sexual orientation or gender identity. Just like we know the enormous myth about asking kids about suicide never has shown to increase their risk for suicide. In fact, we show the opposite, that it actually protects them and saves their lives. So again, talking about gender identity, your innate sense of self, your sexual orientation, who you're attracted to, it does no harm. They are normal conversations, just the way that teens and young kids start having crushes and start dating when they're heterosexual. It's the same exact concept.
Okay. Representative Johnson, go ahead.
As a matter of fact, those conversations, they do no harm, but they also do a whole lot of good, helping other kids to understand how another kid in the classroom might be feeling, how some of their peers might be feeling. I'll never forget in my high school class having a student who had 2 moms, and he got harassed a lot about that. And so I sat down with my class. Like I said, my kids were emotionally disturbed behavior disorder kids. And so the last thing I needed was kids constantly bullying each other or calling them out. So we had what we call problem solves throughout the day, and we would talk about what the issues were. And we tried to build sort of a team atmosphere in the classroom because the kids were not good at trusting. And so we sat down and we talked about, having 2 moms and what that looked like, or, it just kind of familiarized the other kids, sort of took the mystery away. Oh, okay, it's just the same, only, and then a couple of kids were even, well, gosh, that might be cool to have 2 moms. But what it did was it stopped all the bullying. It's the same thing. They're not allowing us to talk about race in our classrooms, and talking about race is how we get people to understand and to really know the past and the history, know where this is coming from, and be able to get along better. So these conversations are critical to gaining a little understanding, compassion, empathy for people who are a little bit different than you. My colleagues seem so terrified of it all. It's so weird to me. Like, why does this scare you, who someone loves? It has zero to do with you. But, they won't discuss it. It's quite the phenomenon, I guess.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And you know what's even more disgusting? And as I said earlier, not a Bible thumper. I don't believe in organized religion. You've heard me say it before: weaponized, bastardized, and monetized. But I do believe in God. But And what really bothers me with those people that you're talking about, because I know who you're talking about in the Tennessee House, they always throw religion behind this stuff. And if you want to talk about, and my better half, Debbie, is a scholar when it comes to religion and scripture, Jesus was accepting of all. I know today he'd be a socialist if he came back. He'd be a communist, a socialist, whatever they label him. And you know, but they always throw religion into these talking points, and it's so the opposite of. And I know that you work with. I told you, the only person I know that works in a more toxic environment than Representative Johnson is in D.C., because I think that's probably the most toxic environment I've ever seen. I don't even know how you're able to do it, but God bless you for it. What I want to ask you as well, for both of you, and if you have any other false statements, whether it's political, whether it's just people you see, Dr. P, on Twitter, political, Representative Johnson, if you hear, that you like to throw out there just to squash it, and because we're talking tonight in facts that you get tired of hearing, and it's not, like we said earlier, they're not cutting off boys' penises. They're not doing this stuff, but we hear that they are. It's not happening. The testicles, the genitalia, whatever, they're not doing that. Any other things either one of you like to throw out, false statements to set the record straight?
Well, for me, of course, the genital mutilation lie is a big one, but also this groomer, or that LGBTQ community is more likely to molest children or something like that. That is just, and this whole groomer thing is so utterly ridiculous, because that is, we rarely hear that, but we certainly hear a whole lot about other authority figures doing this. And so it's really frustrating that they continue. I mean, they use it over and over and over, and there's no factual basis for it. Absolutely none. And, there's got to be a way to stop it, because it needs to stop.
Okay. Dr. P, anything you want to add to that? Any false statement? I know you addressed quite a few of them. Anything else that pops in your head you'd like to squash?
It's not a false statement. It's a factual statement that can hopefully squash a lot of the false statements, which is that the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric and Psychological Associations, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, all the major medical organizations and associations that are devoted to the well-being of children and adolescents absolutely support gender-affirming care, safe school environments, and the inclusion of LGBTQ+ kids. So when we have those institutions dedicated to enhancing the well-being of kids, we should listen to them. We should listen to the data and the facts. The other thing that I think is so important, if anyone is listening, like you mentioned, if someone is on the fence, whatever it is, I just want you to know that as an adult, one accepting adult can reduce suicidality by 40% in a young LGBTQ person's life. You can truly change the outcome of a child's life by accepting them as they are, and at least acknowledging and affirming them. That is a fact, and that's data. So I want to make sure those points come across, that we have this data. It's just it's not even being misrepresented. It's not being looked at. So those are the main points that I really hope are the takeaways here.
Okay. In closing, what I would like to ask you both, Dr. P, for people that want to seek you out, parents, teachers, whoever it may be, where can they find you? Put that information out, please, for the viewers.
Sure. So I am on Twitter, not the most ideal platform, but it's at @Dr_Tosh P. So at Dr. Tosh P. You can send me a message, or you can follow me. Also on LinkedIn, so you can just go ahead and Google me. It's Natasha Poulopoulos. That's Poulopoulos.
Okay. And Representative Johnson, what would you like to say to all your constituents and constituents of the other people that across the aisle that I'm not going to knock all the constituents, but I'm not a fan of their leadership. But what would you like to see them continue to do? What can they continue to do is the question, to support civil rights, LGBTQ, and anything, again, that deals with humanity?
Absolutely. Just let's respect the dignity of every human being. And we can all do that and learn. You learn and read about gender identity and all of these things. Try to gain some understanding. We see a lot of times people change their mind when it happens in their family or when they know someone. But try to understand how a family is going through this without it having to happen to you, so that we can have some compassion when we're making laws and consider how vulnerable these young people are, and even how vulnerable the adults can be. If the state is saying that you don't belong, we don't want you here, that's what it feels like to them. And we just need to welcome everyone and respect their dignity, and maybe try to learn a little bit about the things that the different genders and identities that are out there, and gain some understanding. It will go a long way.
Okay. And as well, where can they find you with your social media?
I'm on Twitter, vote Gloria J, and on Facebook, State Representative Gloria Johnson. Instagram, I think, is Rep Gloria Johnson.
Okay. I'm going to close out with a few comments. Before I do that, anything else either one of you would like to put out tonight?
As a psychologist, I put two main resources out there. 988, that's the universal number now to call. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, you just call 988. You'll be connected to a crisis counselor. And for anyone who's LGBTQ+ who needs support over the phone, look at thetrevorproject.org.
Okay. Anything else, Representative Johnson, before I close out?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, ladies, I greatly appreciate Dr. P. Representative Johnson, I greatly appreciate you coming on tonight. Representative Johnson, you already know this. You know I love you to death. We're friends offline. Talk all the time. But you have my platform anytime. And that includes anyone you know, parents, anybody. I don't care if it's a teacher that got fired or they're going to get fired or they're not scared to come on. Political person, I don't care. My show is about moving humanity forward. And that's what it's always going to be about. If you know somebody, please send them my way. I will give them my platform to tell their stories, because these conversations and these stories and this factual information needs to get out there, because I know social media hasn't been around forever, but we have so much bad information put out. And the worst thing is put out by quack doctors on the far right that don't care about what's the oath that you take? The HIPAA, what is it called?
Yeah, the oath of Hippocrates.
Right. They don't care about
accent.
Yeah, they don't care. Donald Trump had that crazy lady, the one who I don't even want to describe what she said to do, nuts. But we have to fight back through our voices and the information and put out factual information. We may not be able to change all hearts and minds because some of them are lost. But if we could change just one, that's an important thing, especially in the lives of LGBTQ community people, and especially kids, because I'm telling you, it's breaking. I'm gonna get emotional because it really really pisses me off, because any child is sacred. To attack them in any way, shape, or form, especially if you have the audacity to go to church on Sunday or say you believe in God, that is so against what we're taught, if you want to go by what the real teachings are. And again, I'm not a Bible thumper. But thank you both so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to drop this show tomorrow because it's 9 o'clock Eastern time now. Again, you have my platform. Thank you. This, folks, what these ladies are talking about, this is what we need in the atmosphere. More of this, and not just segments. Segments are important on regular, national TV, but we got to have longer conversations. And I want to continue to have these. And again, anytime, Dr. P, you're new, now you're family to me. So I'll have you back on again. Okay. Representative Johnson, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a whirlwind. By the way, didn't you have a function to go to? Did you go a dinner or something over the weekend? What was your function?
Yeah, well, I actually had a couple. Friday night I spoke, and last night I was in Jackson at the 60th anniversary of their NAACP dinner, and there were like 500 people there. It was great. So
great. I'm so proud of you. And I'm going to brag about this because Representative Johnson knows it. Before she became world famous, which she is, as a Tennessee 3, I knew her just as Representative Gloria Johnson when she was fighting her took-us off for people before all the cameras came to Tennessee, folks. So this lady is the real deal. You know, I love you and adore you. So both of you have a great night. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, folks, that's another episode of the Bad Brad Berkowitz Show special panel with Dr. P and Representative Gloria Johnson of Tennessee, one of the Tennessee 3. And as I said, a personal friend that I knew before the cameras came to town. Forget about it. She was, is, and always will be a fighter. And now Dr. P as well is a family member of the Bad Brad Berkowitz Show. We'll be bringing her back on more in the future. Folks, you saw at the end of the panel, I got a little emotional. And I stand by what I said. Any young child, LGBTQ+, or if they're not LGBTQ+, that is attacked in their innocence by people on the right with insanity of things that are not happening because they want to gen up their base. And don't forget this, folks, they gen up their base to grift off of it because they learned from the greatest grifter of all time, Donald Trump, that hatred and misinformation lead to dollars. Because a whole part of the country, a big part of the country, I should say, believes in this insanity and perpetuates it, like the Matt Walshes, who didn't have the guts to stand up to me. Matt, I'm right here. I'm not going nowhere. You had the opportunity. You got the bigger platform. Why don't you use it for good and stop lying? Because you all are raising money off of it. It's disgusting. You can have a difference of opinions, but let's stick to facts. But these are the type of people that I'm going to have on my show because they are moving humanity forward and fighting for democracy. So make sure you share this show. Tell people about this show, because if I ever want a show to go viral, it's this one. I'm very, very proud of what these two ladies, who I respect immensely, brought in front of the camera. Because a lot of people talk, but then when the camera lights go on, they don't want to do it. And I respect your privacy, but if you really want to make a difference and you're really about moving humanity forward and fighting for democracy, and you care, then you have to speak up. You have to speak out. And of course, you have to vote, because voting these people out of office that are doing these terrible things is a must. As I say, vote blue or we're all screwed. All right, folks, remember, every act of kindness is a little love we leave behind. Bad Brad out. Thank you for watching the Bad Brad Berkowitz Show. Please follow, subscribe, leave comments, forget about it, and move humanity forward.